Well, I think we can go ahead and kick things off. My name's Bené Hershon. I'm the Community Engagement Director at the Conservation District. And I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Amanda Littleton, who's our district manager. And Amanda is going to be moderating tonight's chat. So because I'm sharing my screen, if you have any questions as tonight's presentation goes on, Amanda will be in the chat, kind of directing those questions, and we'll save plenty of time for the end of tonight's call just to go through those questions. But thank you all so much for being here. And I'm just actually looking through the chat right now. It's awesome to see we've got folks in Dublin, Rindge, Keene, Hinsdale. It's nice to get a good representation of folks from all over the county. So tonight we're here to talk about the Conservation Opportunity Fund. And yeah, I'm excited to go through this opportunity with you all. And you're totally in the right place if you're interested in making, a meaningful impact on your property and looking to expand wildlife habitat. Alrighty, so I know we did a little of this already, but I'm just going to invite folks to unmute if they'd like to share, if they have a project idea in mind, or, why they're interested in this opportunity. And we always love to hear how you heard about the grant. So if anyone would like to unmute, feel free to just kind of, I know we already did introductions in the chat, but if you want, seems like we're working with a smaller group tonight, so you can feel free to unmute and just go ahead and share.
I don't see myself anywhere, so I'm not sure I'm visible.
I can see you, Georgina.
I can see you, but I don't see myself. So is that the way it's supposed to be? Anyway,
I think that's all right.
All right. So I have been a previous recipient for some pollinator, actually a meadow, which is in progress. Then I've added to that this year, and I'm going to add more in the spring. I'm wondering, the last time I applied, it was pretty specific on what was allowed.
Yep.
So I have a project that I have not seen. I've not seen. I want to create a pond. It's not currently a wetland. It probably used to be way, way, way long ago. And then 119 was changed and the drainage was put in. So it's no longer there, but it's possible to recreate it. And I'm wondering if there would be anything available for that.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I mean, I think we've had folks reach out in the past for ponds, and that's just unfortunately not something that we've funded through this grant opportunity. Um, if if you're looking, I know you mentioned drainage. Are you having an issue with like flooding on the property?
Not at all. Not at all. So I have well, there's 2.5 acres on one piece of property and an acre adjoining. And my goal is to show people, and we're very showy along 119. I can't step out my door, but what people want to know what I'm doing. And so it's really set up perfectly for people to notice. So the pollinator thing, which has gotten some quite a bit of interest so far, but I want to, so the drainage is there now. It drains. The property, all the water goes to 2 spots, on one between the 2 properties and one on the bigger property. The water all goes in that direction, and all I would need to do, and the other part of that equation is on each of those sites, we have drilled wells that could keep the level level during any drought or whatever. It would keep it stable.
Yeah.
So I'm just itching just itching to add to, because the things that have appeared since I started this are pretty amazing, and I just want to keep it up with the aquatic end of it as well.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I was just wondering if that was possible, and I guess
Yeah.
not. So
Yeah.
that's
Unfortunately,
all right. It's
yeah, it's not something that we've funded, but I think it's interesting to hear what's going on the property, and it's definitely something for us to take into consideration if this continues to be a need among, landowners in Cheshire County.
Well,
But
there's so much water that so much of it is just being eliminated. It's scary, people just don't realize.
no,
So they need to be shown, the same with the gardening thing. It's like, no, these aren't horrible things. These are bird food, you silly
yeah.
gooses.
Well, I'm glad you're on tonight's call and that we were able to answer that question. But I think it's also great for folks to hear from someone who's done one of the Conservation Opportunity Fund projects. And I remember your project quite well. And so I think it's an exciting opportunity. So we're gonna dive into some of the slides on some of the eligible projects. And maybe it'll give you some inspiration for ways to expand what's currently going on the property.
That would be great. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, just an overview for folks joining tonight who may not be familiar with the grant opportunity. The mission of the Conservation Opportunity Fund is to provide funding for owners of small tracts of land who are interested in improving wildlife habitat on their property. And so the way this works is that the Conservation Opportunity Fund will reimburse your project costs. So this is not an upfront grant. And so the way that it typically works, if you were to apply for this grant and you were to be awarded, we would ask for you, to keep track of your receipts and your budget. And when your project concludes, then the conservation district would reimburse you for the costs up to $1,500. Now, another unique thing about the Conservation Opportunity Fund is that the planning, the design, and the installation is the responsibility of the landowner. Or, if you were interested in hiring a contractor to help in the installation of your project, that would be the responsibility of you. But we are here, the district staff, and some really amazing community partners that we have. We're here to help provide that technical assistance piece. We're happy to connect you with resources and really answer any questions or, take time to brainstorm ideas with you all. We're just not here to be the ones to do the designing and the actual, installation. And so I think sometimes that can get lost in the weeds when we promote this grant. So I just want to make that super clear before we dive in tonight that we're not actually the ones doing the installation. So just an overview of the eligibility for this grant. And it sounds like everyone meets the requirement of being a private landowner or steward in Cheshire County. So it's a thumbs up for everyone who's shared in the chat where they're calling in from tonight. And another important thing is that if you are applying for this grant, we just ask that the project site has security. So, for example, you might not be the landowner of the property, but we're looking, if you are a renter, that you have a long-term lease for the property. And the reason that we ask for that is, we're investing in additional habitat, and we just want to make sure that the project continues to be successful and continues to be maintained. This program is also for owners of small tracts of land. So that would be 25 acres or less total. So sometimes that can also be a confusing piece of this. Sometimes we work with landowners who have 25 acres in Gilsum and then they have another 25 acres in Chesterfield. But we ask that the total amount of acreage that you own or steward be 25 acres or less. And this is a really exciting opportunity. We've had the opportunity to work with individuals, businesses, organizations, farmers, and forest landowners. And I would just encourage you all. I think being here tonight is an awesome first step as you think through that application and what you might want to apply for. But definitely take a look at the grant page on our website. We have examples of past projects that we funded. We have really great detailed blog posts that folks have shared and submitted along with other resources. That I would encourage you to just familiarize yourself and draw inspiration from. So let's dive into some of those eligible project categories. So I would say that one of the most popular projects that we fund is the installation of native pollinator habitat. So what that means are areas planted with native vegetation that provide nectar and pollen sources, as well as offering a low disturbance area for nesting and egg laying. I think the really great thing about installing native pollinator habitat on your property, and you can kind of see 2 examples of what folks have done in the past. And I don't know if it flips around when I share my screen, but on my left-hand side, what I see right now, maybe it's on your right-hand side, you can see kind of like that front lawn area where there's kind of more of an open bed where the native plants can kind of have like delightfully taken over. And so that's one example we see. And then another example we see is kind of like this nice maintained raised bed situation. And so I think like the beauty of native pollinator habitat installation is that whether you're a seasoned gardener or you're just starting out on gardening, there's a lot of different sizes and scales that you can install native pollinator habitat. It doesn't have to be, an entire meadow. It can be like a really lovely raised bed. And we have some really great examples of folks who have installed kind of more of this contained version. But then we also have examples on our website in our blog posts of people who have done more of like a meadow style pollinator habitat. And then another example of that eligible project is the conversion of a lawn or a full field to native plant gardens. So this is just kind of like, the installation of native pollinator habitat, but at that much larger scale. So another part of our eligible projects, and I think like a category that has gained a lot of traction in the past few years, just with the amount of rainfall that we sometimes have been getting and the amount of flooding, has been the installation of rain gardens. So a rain garden is a depressed area of a landscape that can collect water, rainwater from a roof, a driveway, or a street, and it allows the water to soak into the ground. So the rain gardens are planted with a mix of native perennials and shrubs, and they do a stellar job at managing stormwater runoff and improving water quality. So we actually have a really great partnership with Soak Up the Rain New Hampshire. And they're a small agent, they're like a small subsection of the Department of Environmental Services in New Hampshire. And this partnership that we have with Soak Up the Rain allows for applicants to really utilize the different resources, which can actually be found linked on our grant page of our website. And Soak Up the Rain has examples of designs on their website. They have how-to videos. They also have a really terrific staff that would, I'm sure, welcome a phone call if you had a question about rain gardens. And, if you do go ahead and go that route where you're consulting these different resources and decide to reach out to the team at Soak Up the Rain, I would just encourage you to include that in your application. It would create a really compelling proposal. Another example of an eligible project, and I think we have one or two examples that we've actually of folks who have done this, is the creation and maintenance of early successional habitat. So old fields, shrublands, and young forests are often referred to as early successional habitat. And these are really increasingly uncommon in the New Hampshire landscape right now, just with the amount of development that has been going on in the state. And they're really important in creating that diversity of wildlife. So you can kind of see an example of what that looks like, where you have like smaller example. You can see in this like really great drawing, the early successional habitat is kind of like this mix of like smaller shrubs, and then you have smaller trees, and then it's up against this kind of like older mature forest. And we've seen like really great success in projects like this, when folks are working with a lot of forest land, or maybe they have open fields on their property. And so this is a really exciting project idea, I think. It's something that's not quite as common as the pollinator habitat, but equally as impactful. Another example of an eligible project would be the creation of a vegetated buffer on surface waters. So that could be lakes, it could be streams, and we see this planting along surface water buffers. They're planted with native trees, shrubs, and perennials, and that's really to reduce erosion and improve water quality. So Georgina, I know you were interested in more of like that creation of that aquatic habitat, but this is kind of an example of the fund supporting aquatic habitat in that way. So we've seen a lot of success in that vegetated buffer projects. So just to dive into the type of projects that the fund does give priority to. So what we really like to see, and it might sound like an obvious thing, is we love to see applications that follow the guidelines listed. And I was saying this, we had an information call last night for another one of our grants. But I was saying that I always get really excited about things when I have a project idea, and I just kind of want to dive into it, and I sometimes skate past all the details. So I would just encourage you to, take time to read over our request for proposals or the RFP document, and to also look over the application itself, and just to make sure that everything's in line with your vision, and that, making sure that you are eligible and that what you're applying for is also eligible. We love to see projects that have a really detailed plan for the site preparation and also the long-term maintenance. Oftentimes, folks are really excited, we're providing up to $1,500 to fund your project, but it's also really important to consider the future costs and the amount of time that come along with that maintenance. I can't honestly think of any example of a project that we funded that has been kind of like a one and done situation. These projects continue to evolve year to year. And, folks have expressed to me, maybe they'll plant, like a really lovely bed of native plants. They do a pollinator garden. And then winter comes along and they have this gorgeous garden, and then the snow melts away and they start to realize certain things aren't growing in the way that they want. And so there are additional costs later on. And so that's just something to consider and be mindful of. And so we really want to hear about how you anticipate keeping these projects going into the future. And we want to invest in projects that are going to be sustainable. And we want to make sure that we're setting you up for success as well, and that you're thinking of these things going into it. We're also interested in funding projects that really demonstrate that you've put thought and time and resources into this. Um, we also want projects that are informed by the ecology of our region and are going to make a difference. And so I think most of these projects will make a difference no matter what, but we also want to make sure that they're a good fit for your property as well. So that's something to consider. And we also love opportunities to partner with you all and to share the stories of what you've done on your property. So that could look like a lot of people are interested in writing blog posts that we love to share in our newsletters and on our website. It could be taking a photo of your project and we'll spotlight it on our social media, or maybe you're really interested in that community education piece. Maybe you live in a high traffic area where a lot of people drive by or walk by. And, something we've seen in the past is folks want to open up their properties and want to invite people to come and learn about them. And that's certainly not an expectation for these projects, but something to consider. We always love an opportunity to spotlight the work that you're all doing in this. So just an example of some non-eligible projects through this grant. Projects that have already been installed or are in progress. So if you've already broken ground on your project, if you've already started it, we unfortunately cannot fund it. We also ask that projects from successful grantees from past years, we cannot, award funds immediately to successful grantees, and we ask that you wait 2 years before applying again. And just to reiterate, the Conservation Opportunity Fund does not provide funding for landowner time. It doesn't fund research or feasibility studies. We want to make sure that the projects that we're investing in have a track record of being successful. And we also do not fund efforts that won't lead to improved wildlife habitat. Okay, so I have already mentioned this, but I'll just reiterate the way our funding works. So we unfortunately we can't award grants that surpass that $1,500 mark. So anything asking more than that won't be considered. And just to reiterate that grants are paid through reimbursement. And I shared a little bit about this already, but at the completion of the project, the grantee will submit a request for reimbursement along with the final report. So the final report does include providing copies of all invoices and receipts that are expected to be reimbursed. And grantees are also asked to submit a record of the time and funds they spent on completing the project that was not covered by the grant. Okay, so just an overview of our timeline. So proposals are due February 1st. From February 1st to the 28th, our application review committee will be going through the projects. And during this time, we might reach out to you via phone or email just to clarify any questions that the application review committee may have. And by March 15th, you'll be notified of your funding decision, whether you were funded or not. And if you were awarded funding, just to note that final reports are due December 31st of 2025. So we ask that the project be completed by the end of the year. And just to provide a little information on what it does look like if you were to receive funding, we would notify you around March that you got the funding, you were awarded. And then from there, we would go ahead and schedule a site visit. And we have a really fantastic group of partners from the Natural Resource Conservation Service, other colleagues through the district. And we'll just come to your property and we'll assess the area where you're hoping on installing your project. We'll answer any questions you have. We'll provide that technical assistance piece, and we'll really, walk you through the next steps of what the grant looks like. And so just to reiterate, this is like not a process where We'll just send you an email and let you know you got the funding and then you're on your own. This is something where we're really here to support you. We want to make sure that these projects are successful, and we're happy to continue to be a resource to answer questions into the future. We just really want to see these projects be successful. And like, I also want to reiterate that this is supposed to be a fun grant. We want to support creativity and we want to support this is like a really, I think it's an awesome experience. It's something I look forward to year, is just meeting different folks throughout our county and hearing what they're able to do. And I feel like I've actually never encountered anyone who's had a negative experience with this grant. And I feel like people take a lot away from this process. And yeah, so we're here to make sure that this is fun and not scary and not overwhelming. Okay, so just an overview of what the proposal looks like and what we'd really like to see. So the project narrative section, and I think I actually, on the next few slides, I actually have all of the questions on the screen and we can just go through them. But the project narrative, those questions are really the opportunity to describe your project and your goals. So what we want to see here is just well thought out description of your project. Sometimes I notice that folks can be a little too concise in what they share in this. And so it's just important to include as much detail as possible. We're certainly not looking for a novel, but we're also not looking for, a four-word answer. So this is really an opportunity to showcase how you want to transform your property, how you want to support wildlife in the area. And so I always say that when you're writing this, to kind of write from the mindset of someone who hasn't seen your property, because, we don't do any site visits prior to making our decisions. And so it's just important that we have a pretty full understanding of what this project is going to look like. Now, for the budget, we're also asking for as much detail as possible. So I would encourage you, as you're, trying to figure out, maybe you're looking to do a raised bed and you want to plant native plants in that. I would encourage you to, go online, see how much a bag of compost is costing right now. Go on to, if you're interested in buying plants, for example, maybe you'll go on the Native Plant Trust website and take a look at their catalog for the year ahead. And just include, your sources in your budget as well. It's always helpful for us to get an idea of how you piece this together. And I just want to say that like the budget that you create for your project right now is not binding. We know that year to year prices change. Maybe you'll think that you need a lot of compost and in the end you don't end up needing that. You needed more of your budget focused on actually the plants. So just to reiterate, like there's a lot of flexibility here, but we just want to see that this is a well thought out plan. Another component of your proposal is a map. Now, we're not expecting anyone to be an artist. We have had people in the past who've been like quite talented in creating maps, and I think they set the bar a little too high. We're really just asking for a rough drawing of your property. It could also be a digital map if that's something you're more comfortable with. I think last year someone just took a screenshot of like the aerial map that's available through Google Maps. And it can just be a rough drawing of where you plan to install your project, and just it's helpful for us to get an idea of what your project may look like as well. And then photos, we just ask you to submit 1 to 2 photos of your proposed project site. So I think being here and thinking things through now well in advance of February is an awesome first step. And so if you have an idea of your project site, I would just encourage you to try to get a photo when you can, because by February 1st, we don't know, there could be 5 feet of snow. And it might just be hard for us to get an idea of what your project site actually looks like. So just something to keep in mind with the timing and, unfortunately it's winter. I know some people love winter. I'm not one of them, but uh, but that's just me. So just to reiterate, we have a lot of really amazing resources on the website right now. And one of our awardees in the past created a great directory of the different native plants they used. We have awesome blog posts outlining examples. So I would just, take an hour and just go through our website, and, it might be, you might be able to draw some inspiration from what you see. And I think the biggest thing is just taking the time to research your budget and plan and be sure to really say, hey, you can really write in your application, I put this amount of research into what I did. And like, I have this idea for the project and here's why. And just noting that is really important. And you can just feel free to contact me with any clarifying questions throughout this process. And I'm also happy if you have an application ready well in advance of February 1st. I'm happy to read over it and offer any feedback if you want to send me a draft. And that is my email on the screen as well as my phone number. And you can feel free to just let me know if you have any questions. And I'll be sending a follow-up email to everyone who's on this call. And so all of these links and the contact information will be there as well. Alrighty, so this is just, I have all of the questions that were in the application just on the screen. I figured we could just go over them right now, just so you have an idea of what it looks like. So that project narrative section where you're really going to be showcasing what your project is. Just a few simple questions. So we ask you to briefly describe your project. We want to hear what the expected outcomes of your project are. So really those results. What's your goal? We want to hear, what do you anticipate the impacts of the project to be? How is it going to support the wildlife on your property? And maybe your expected outcome is, this is where you would clearly state, I plan on installing pollinator property or not property, a pollinator garden, or I plan on installing early successional habitat and just kind of explaining what your hopes are for that. Then we go into what are the activities and tasks that you will complete to reach your outcomes. Please provide details on the anticipated site preparation that will be necessary for any planting projects. So this is where you would really go into the nitty-gritty of things and kind of walk us through what that process looks like. So, and Georgina, you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I remember with your project, there was some silage tarps that were used to prep that site. Maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, so just
No,
let me know.
that's right. Yep.
Yeah, so for example, if we had Georgina's application from a few years ago in front of us, what it probably said was, I'm going to Georgina probably walked us through the entire process that she had in mind for the site. So it was kind of like this like field area. So I'm going to put down these silage tarps, and the silage tarps are going to suppress the grass. And then once the grass is dead, I'm going to plan to remove the silage tarps and I'm going to put down compost. And so just really taking the time to walk us through, kind of like you're explaining it to someone who might not know, anything about the project, and just including as much detail as possible. And so some of the other questions, number 4, the conservation district is here to provide technical assistance to ensure the success of your project. We want to know what guidance would be most helpful to you. We're not asking anyone to be an expert in this field. We're all learning in this together. And so this just helps us ensure that we're able to support you in the best way possible. Then we're going to ask you to briefly describe what skills and resources you have to successfully complete this project. Maybe you're a long-term gardener. Maybe you have access to water sources to ensure that the plants are going to, settle into those garden beds successfully. So just outlining, how this project is going to be successful. Then we want to hear about your plan for long-term maintenance and sustainability of the project. So this is where you would share, like, for example, if you're interested in continuing to commit a certain amount of time to ensuring that the garden, for if you're going to be doing a garden project, this is where you would state, I'm interested in continuing to devote time to make sure that, like, the beds are weeded, and that if plants die, that I'll switch them out. And so that's where you would state that there. And then we want to hear about that educational component that I had shared before. What are you interested in doing as part of this project? Do you want to do a workshop on your property? Are you someone who's more interested in writing? Or are you a photographer interested in that and you want to share photos with us to share on our social media or our website? So it's just an opportunity to take the time to really think these things through now. Alrighty, well, I've done a whole lot of talking. So I'm gonna have a sip of water and I would love to just open it up to questions. If you want to, this is also an opportunity if you want to talk through some of your project ideas, I'm happy to answer any questions right now. And I just want to thank you guys again for spending your evening here. So with that, I'll just open it up to you all. Yeah, go ahead, Beth.
Um, I I also can't see myself on the screen, so I assume you can see me.
I can
Um,
see you.
okay, I with my husband own a commercial property in downtown Keene, and we've been doing improvements for wildlife over the past 8 or so years, and um, so we have several projects underway that I understand will not be eligible, but we have a ground mount solar array in our parking lot, and there are a lot of plants that are starting to grow underneath the solar array.
Yeah.
And I wondered, we have a pollinator garden that's about 14 by 20 feet, a raised garden bed in the parking lot, and that we will continue to improve. But a large parking spot away from this pollinator garden raised bed area is this solar array, and we rent parking to Keene State College students and to employees of a pediatric dentist office down the road. So it's not what you called a low disturbance area, but you could have a parking lot pollinator garden that's surrounded by a fence that would qualify as low disturbance, even though cars park nearby.
Yeah. It's a
Okay.
good question. I think, and Amanda, you can feel free to jump in, but it sounds like there wouldn't be, it sounds like there's space from what you're describing. I'm just trying to mentally picture it.
I'll jump in and say
Yeah.
the property is almost 2 acres,
Okay.
and it's near the bike path. And we have, it's on Foundry Street, and the building that we own was the commercial foundry in Keene that was built in 1850.
Wow.
And so it's a large old brick building with warehouse space, office space, and parking area surrounded by like an L-shaped area of some green space, a lot of wild crabapple trees or apple trees, and but also a lot of bittersweet and a lot of sumac and a lot of other plants that are less desirable. But it's a space where we've seen skunks and we've seen fox and we have a groundhog family that lives on the property, and we have a lot of common milkweed and butterfly weed and black-eyed Susans and things like that that attract butterflies and other pollinators. But the area specifically under the ground mount solar array is a kind of a mess of non-native and native plants, and that I think could be an interesting extension of our pollinator plantings in other parts of the property.
Yeah, that's neat. And I think it sounds like a really creative use of that space under the array too. So just to clarify, is there a parking spot right next to the array that's being used, or?
Um, yes, there are parking spots. Well, there's a fence so that
Okay. So there's
people can't get to the array
Okay.
without bypassing a fence. So there
Okay.
are cars parked beside it, but there are 66 solar panels in the array. It's a pretty large 6x11 array, and there is a very large area that would be available for us to do pollinator plantings. We probably couldn't do the full area under the solar array. It's just too big.
I gotcha. Then I think it would be fine with that fence there. I think the concern would be if there wasn't a fence and if, folks were parking right alongside the array, but it doesn't sound like that. So I think it would be a great fit.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate it.
Hi, thank you very much for all the information. This is very helpful. So my name is Jeff, and I learned about this opportunity through the Dublin Conservation Commission.
Oh, awesome.
So as a new member, I just learned we've been doing a lot of invasive species management, and this is really nice. The next step of reintroducing native species or doing the wildlife restoration. And so what I'm interested in doing is adding pollinator habitat to our property, but also managing water flow. And so, I'm still kind of figuring out what's appropriate if a rain garden, where that should be sited.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, is machinery rental or tools, in terms of grading the property to manage water flow, is that something that could be covered by this grant too?
A good question. And so I feel like, with a project like a rain garden, often we're gonna need that machinery in order to install it. So I'm gonna let Amanda jump in. I believe it's an allowable expense, but I just want to be sure.
Yep, absolutely, Benay, you're correct. It sure is an allowable expense. We just like to see, the project to be thoughtfully designed, and if it's needed, heavy equipment can be brought in. If it can be done with hand tools, then that's also a great thing too. It just sort of depends on the scope of the project.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. That was very helpful. So yeah, I think I'm at the stage where, I've got a couple sites where, could be great for things as we're, adding more valuable habitat to the area. And so, I look forward to, submitting a proposal later and getting some feedback from you. So thank
Yeah,
you very much.
definitely.
This was helpful, and I hope you all have a pleasant evening.
You too. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm glad to hear it was helpful. Awesome. Any additional questions that I can answer for folks? Okay, well, I just want to reiterate as you go ahead and, begin your projects, Please don't be a stranger. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I'm always happy to look over a draft before you go ahead and submit. And I will send a follow-up email with some of the, we'll have a recording. I'll be sure to include the slides from tonight. And yeah, I look forward to reading over some of your proposals. It sounds like a lot of really different exciting ideas, and so I'm excited to hear more about them. And yeah, thanks again for just spending a chunk of your evening with us, and I hope you guys have a great night and a happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank
very much.
you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, definitely reach out, Kathy, if you have a draft. I'd be happy to read it over. Awesome. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen. I'm gonna end tonight's call, but I hope everyone has a good night. Take care.